it is time. It's time to start this whole thing. Yoink! In last episode, we have went through the transgender hormone therapy Wikipedia article. Today, we will ask ourselves a few important questions, such as, what does it mean for a treatment to be quote-unquote experimental? We are going to ask ourselves if the treatments really are experimental, and we're gonna also examine who does the narrative of the whole thing being experimental really serve. So in other words, what are you really trying to do when you say that the trans affirming care is experimental? What do you think of today's plan of action? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready to rumble or not? Let's see. Yesterday we made like a very brief overview of the whole topic. We've looked at a few studies. One of it actually did say that our knowledge about trans youth healthcare is pretty sparse and that we need more. But as we know, Stephen, aka Destiny, made two claims. One, that is that we have no strong evidence for either children or adult trans affirming healthcare, and that it's all highly experimental. So today we go a little more in depth. I have actually looked up a few articles that tackle that question directly, and also some silly studies. Like, for example, there is this study that I have found here that tries to establish a biological route to gender identity based on the length of fingers, I guess. So I guess that's a thing. I guess we go from skull shapes to finger length. This is how the science moves forward. Okay, this is progress. No more skull shapes. Now we do finger length as the future of scientific inquiry. Okay, all right. We read about the feminizing hormone therapy. We read about HRT in depth. We read about some. We did not touch upon this. This is a whole different topic that we will be looking over some other time, about how the topic of transition when it comes to non-binary people. This is like a different topic, not for today. Here we have the Howard Brown Health Center establishes transgender hormone protocol. We have looked at this yesterday as well. We are tracing back at what we have done yesterday in order to be able to, a little bit of a refresher before we move on, right? We went through the whole Wikipedia about HRT. We went through this abstract about research, priorities for gender non-conforming transgender youth, gender identity development, and biophysiological outcomes. We have looked through this. Mind you, there might be a reasonable inquiry to understand how hormonal balances affect development of embryo. My issue here is the attempt of classification and linking it so something obviously more complex from a really small sample. True. It's more true than I have ever imagined before it to be true. Also, before we move forward, smash the like button, become a Patreon, subscribe, and of course, let me let me link the stream to some discords in order to, yeah, how do you say, draw some audiences to the, you know, some audiences to this stream, to this extremely important stream. Okay. Boom. Let's go to the vouch server because vouchers always like this sort of thing, right? No? Do you agree? Do you agree with me? I think vouchers really like this sort of thing. So we go to the voucher. There you go. Hormonal problems can be so. For example, hormonal problems could perhaps cause issue of hand development. Right. Yeah, vouchers, as I call them. Okay. So we will look at some articles. I know articles by themselves are not very powerful sources of information, but when articles start actually linking studies as their sources, when articles actually start citing their sources, then it suddenly becomes a far more nice thing to look at. So let's look at this article. Gender affirming care is not quote unquote experimental. Like a whole slew of articles, as in response to Stephen's claim, are available on the internet, and we will go through some of them because they seem to be actually giving us research to work with, okay? And they also expose a certain, let's say, narrative that is being created by the whole it's experimental line, right? It's not just said out of concern. It's not just said because, oh, it's experimental, so we should get more information. There's a rather more devious reason why people like to say that gender affirming care is experimental. Gender affirming care remains the evidence-based standard of care for gender dysphoria and transgender adolescents, despite claims by some laws and lawmakers that it is experimental. In 2022 alone, 15 states introduced a total of 25 bills intended to restrict access to gender-affirming GA care to trans children and adolescents. And this is important to give this context because I have decided to do this series of research streams to look into trans affirming care and just how experimental and untested it is, because Stephen Destiny has fairly recently had a conversation with a trans woman called Taftaj, a right-leaning trans woman. And on one hand, we had Taftaj saying that she tells people not to transition because it's not good and you neglect your mental health. And on the other hand, you had Stephen, was saying that evidence for it all is very weak and that it's all highly experimental, right? So as you can imagine, this is a pretty strong claim to say that there is no strong evidence for any of it at all, that it's all a big experiment, especially if we when we live in the reality of several bills being pushed non-stop in order to ban trans-affirming care altogether, right? So it is very important to push against such narratives, especially in our climate. So let's see. So we are here. Trans, a common abbreviation for transgender, is used here as an umbrella term to describe people whose gender identity does not align with the gender to which they were assigned at birth. And GA, care includes medical, surgical, mental health, which of course this was contested during Stevens and Taftaj's little talk. Taftaj kept trying to frame gender care as transition, and that transition is being pushed as the solution to any mental problems, which is blatantly incorrect. Medical transition is not being pushed as the solution to any mental problems that a trans individual might be facing. Taftaj is gonna get a hell of a surprise when it kicks off, and the people she thought were on her side send her to the camp with the rest of us. True. And non-medical care intended to affirm trans people in their gender identity, which is very good because our research, we have focused yesterday on hormone replacement therapy, but we have focused on hormone replacement therapy, but the gender affirming care goes beyond that, right? It goes into things like surgery, it goes things into social transition, it goes into things like mental health care, therapy, many things. Digit ratio is on shaky ground, really, right? So let's go. Some of these bills even go so far as to criminalize gender affirming care. For example, the Alabama law would make it a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison for medical providers found guilty, quote unquote, of prescribing gender affirming puberty blockers and hormones to people under the age of 19. I bet plastic surgery, when applied to trans care, is experimental, but none in restorative or beauty standards. This is actually very interesting, Karasu, because I am pretty sure we would need to look it up, that there is a push to ban breast-related surgery for trans men and women, but keep them for cis girls that want to enhance their breasts, which is gender affirming care for cis people, but not for trans people. Let's be very clear about that, right? This is clearly just banning gender affirming care for trans people, but not for cis people. Cis people can get all the cis people can get all the gender affirmation that they need. What we call experimental is changes, but what go and to whom we apply to, apparently. Remove breast can assure spinal pain long term if too heavy. Yeah. Breast can cause spinal pain. That is why there are people that maybe like, I wonder if removal some would be banned to cis women too. Like, mm, there was a famous actress that has removed her breasts because she was in the risk group of cancer, and she just didn't want to go through life with that risk, so she just removed her breasts. That's a cis woman, right? I wonder if removal some would be banned. I wonder if reduction would be banned. It could be. Who knows? Like some women just reduce their breast size because, as you say, it causes very real issues with back pain, and it's just a heavy load. Some people want to reduce it and feel happy about it. So that's a thing. We can even look into it. One of my friends got a breast cancer from a dodgy breast implant. No, gender reconstructive surgery, for instance, has a very strong history. Oh, and the Utah bill explicitly attempts cis girls from the ban on breast augmentation for teenage girls. Yeah, exactly. That is what I'm talking about. That is, Stephanie, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about. That cis girls are being exempt from the breast surgery ban, because it's literally gender affirming care for cis people, but not for trans people. Yes, Stephanie helped here with helped here with the Utah example. But I would not put it past legislators to go further and say, you know what, let's just keep it for cis girls to enhancement and not for reduction. That we know these surgeries exist long and we don't call it experimental. This is also a thing, right? Hormone replacement therapy existed before gender affirming care for treating things like the menopause, right? But the question is, how does hormone replacement therapy for other things translate to hormone replacement therapy as gender affirming care? I would think that those things overlap, at least to some degree, which would mean that automatically we have a lot more studies and history to fall back on, right? If those things overlap at least to some degree, right? Right? I mean, it could very well be. It like Karasu is actually as ironic as Karasu is. It might very well happen that suddenly the road to reducing breast size for trans women, like for cis women, will become gate kept as well. Do you really need that? Let me check if you're not like mentally ill first. Let us check if you're in your right state of mind to be making such a decision as reducing your breasts. Like, who knows? Like, the sky is the limit for those legislators. And we do know that they love to assert control over others, right? Yeah, but for trans boys, that's forbidden under the Utah bill, at least. Yeah, that is the, that is the, that is unfortunately the road. It is so easy to mistake cis girls, assuming they might due to it to be trans men. Because you'd reduce something society fetishizes feminine. True. Like, this is step one. Just banning reduction for just for trans men might as well be step one. Who knows what step 2 or 3 will be? But that's like that's speculation. Let's focus on what's happening now. Some of these bills even go as far as to criminalize. We have read this. 10 years in prison for gender affirming care, right? For giving gender affirming care to people under 19. So that alone is a pretty alarming and messed up law on the books, right? As a result of these legislative efforts, over 58,000 trans youth could potentially lose access to gender affirming care depending on how many become law and which states. And even if they don't become law, those legislators will keep pushing until some of the laws, they don't need all of the laws to pass. All they need is for some of the laws to slip through the cracks, and then they can continue pushing more and more and more, and the bills that pass will compile in time, right? That is basically just what, like, that is the strategy, right? For the bills that passed, even if there's a few of them, in time there will be more and more and more that will pass, and the thing will compound on itself, right? It's blatantly discriminatory, and some bills are pending banning medical intervention before the age of 25. Exactly, yeah, of course. That is the whole point of this whole thing. So when you discuss if it's that's a really important point, right? When you discuss if the thing is experimental, one of the main questions to ask is, what does it mean if it's experimental, and why do you want it to be experimental, and where do you go from there if it is, right? And the answer of the legislators is, if it's experimental, then it should be absolutely banned, which, as we will learn, it's not experimental. The predominant theme of these bills is the claim that gender-affirming care is experimental, which, of course, I would like to once again take us back to the video that made me want to do this research stream in the first place. The fact that Stephen so comfortably slots himself with the far-right legislators' narratives about gender-affirming care. This false claim is commonly used as the primary justification for outlawing such care. Indeed, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Ohio bills even share the very same name, the Save Adolescents from Experimentation, SAFE Act. And the preambles of many of these bills characterize gender-affirming care as not just experimental, but harmful, while also making false scientific claims about biology, sex, and gender. Gender dysphoria and the psychological and medical care of gender dysphoria. These bills are reminiscent of the strategy that anti-vaxxers have used to demonize COVID-19 vaccines, in which they portray them as experimental, which is actually a good point, that many anti-vaxxers would keep saying that the COVID-19 vaccine is just one big experiment, and therefore dangerous, even to the point of making false claims that these vaccines violate the Nuremberg Code, right? People like this always make the same sort of claims. Which, of course, this is why the whole talk about experimentation, right? That there is this strong implication that because it's experimental, in this case, young people are being used as test subjects, and we don't know what the effect will be, that children might like, I don't know, grow an extra arm, die, or anything really, because we don't know. It's an experiment. So like children are just being given drugs, and they're like, it's like a big test, like, you know, like animals in big pharma companies, right? This is the claim. For example, Ohio on vaccination. It's a technique hundreds of years old now. That's longer with us than antibiotics. We don't call antibiotics experimental, right? Yeah, but this is where the insidious and very dishonest element comes in, because okay, this is like, anti-vaxxers are really bizarre people, right? You have two camps in the anti-vaxxers. There are people that reject all vaccination. Any vaccination is bad. Any vaccination is actually quote unquote experimental and will hurt you, right? This is the anti-vax larger crowd. But then you have the second smaller crowd within that bigger crowd that only says that vaccinations overall are okay, but the COVID-19 specifically is bad because it's been rushed, it's not been tested enough, and therefore this specific vax is experimental, right? And of course, there's the whole fact that there's a new way to make vaccination, the RNA stuff, which makes people think that like there's like this other still group that claims that vaccination rewrites your DNA, which is like a whole other science fiction claim that people actually unironically make. So the umbrella of anti-vaxxers is so bad that it's not even like, I don't know, you know, horrible. Like, and actually my friend made a really good video about vaccination and anti-vax crowd, because she explained that while it is possible to get the herd immunity from getting sick actually wrecks your immunity to other things. So while you gain immunity to the thing that you get sick, you also, your overall immunity system gets wrecked, you know? So your immunity to other things get weaker. And if you get a vaccine, that does not happen. I'm giving a simplified version, okay? Right? Does that make sense? Like, if you, there are certain things that, yeah, you just have, like, you avoid destroying your immunity to other types of things when you vaccinate, you know? It's true. Okay. Right? We did a little bit of a tangent about anti-vax, but, you know, and we can continue right now. There is definitely a fetishization of being natural. That's right. Frankly, whatever the heck that is supposed to mean. If you're so natural, don't go to the dentist and don't get your fillings, you know? Because getting your teeth fixed is definitely not the quote-unquote natural way, right? Like, going to the dentist is definitely not the natural path. The natural path is just letting your tooth rot or something. I don't know. Your tooth cracks? Too bad. The natural way is just to leave it as it is. Laser eye operation, yeah. Exactly. So I have no clue what this whole natural thing is supposed to mean. Okay. For example, Ohio HB 454, Arkansas HB 1570, and Louisiana HB 570 are bills that are essentially largely copy and pasted from each other, and all three state that the use of GA gender affirming hormones in quote unquote biological females terminology that is inaccurate as explained here. Let's see. Okay, we will look at it later, okay? We have to keep on track. We have to finish one thing because we before we go into several other side things, right? Results in an increased risk of breast and uterine cancers. Evidence is limited for these claims. Indeed, in available studies, transmasculine people, assigned female at birth, or AFAB, people who are on gender affirming testosterone, have been found to have, if anything, a lower risk of breast cancer and endometrial cancer, and certainly no increased risk of ovarian cancer compared to cis women. This is just the start of the bad and cherry-picked science used in those bills to justify outlawing gender-affirming care. The bills also state can I see? Let me see. Stephanie, let me see. General, right? Click the link. Is this being like is this being updated in real time? This is a tracker, right? So it's being updated, right? Yeah, this keeps being updated, right? I know I'm like repeating myself, but right. We should put this in a we should put this like in a thread on the forums. We will do it later. This is like, if this keeps getting updated, then it's like a really valuable resource. Very important. Okay, like this is a great resource. Thank you for this. Okay. Let's go back to the article, right? So thank you very much for this. The bills also state the risks of gender transition procedures far outweigh any benefits at this stage of clinical study on these procedures. So this is basically where we go to the claims that also Stephen has made, that Taftash has made, when Taftash has basically said, maybe it would have been better for me if I got therapy, and she of course named a totally unrelated therapy, giving it a bad name, as Carasso has said, and if I got some friends, right? So there you go. The risk of gender transition procedures far outweigh any benefit at this stage of clinical study on these procedures, so of course they should be banned, right? Yeah, Taftash was, because Taftash is a far rider. like, maybe not, I don't know if she's a far righter. She's right-wing. So basically, she just parrots these sort of assertions, right? This assertion is quite simply untrue. A systemic literature review of research from 1991 to 2017 noted 52 studies listed here. 52 studies. Let's go. 52 studies. This is Cornell University. What we know. What does the scholarly research say about the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being? So this is the overview. Those are like the studies, a big list of studies going back all the way to the 90s. And I'm not even mentioning the thing that Stephanie has said on our last stream, that some studies have been made already in the 50s, right? So this is like not, this is not an exhaustive list of studies. Like 19 is not the furthest back that the studies go on these things, right? So we have here this list of 52 studies going back as far as the 90s at least, right? That tell us about the effectiveness of gender affirming care. So we will look at this later. For now, we continue reading the article. Yeah, indeed, Dan. Wrongly too. Cognitive behavior therapy is not used for what she thinks it is. Right. It is more like, it is different, right? It is, we actually read the wiki for it on stream. We know that it's something very different. It is like, I think it's used from like, this is like, it's like, I think it's used for to untangle certain negative emotions that you associate with certain things, right? Like you can untangle your fear from being in high places, right? Or something like that, right? I think this is like, right? Decouples the emotion of fear, like on be like fear of heights or something like that, or phobia against spiders or things like that, right? It's not a therapy used to make you question your identity, you know? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, she does tell people not to transition. That's right. That's right. She does. She said it multiple times during her talk with Stephen, which talk I encourage you to watch because I have actually done a video on it. But I have not done a video on it yet. I have reacted to it on stream, but I will make a video. I will make a segment out of it, right? Soon. She didn't suggest it. She didn't suggest it. She said it outright. I tell people not to transition. She said it during the talk. Okay, let's go. So this assertion is quite simply untrue. A systematic review of literature review of research from 91 to 2017 noted 52 studies. They are linked here, along with links to the individual studies. showing overall improvement in the well-being of trans people following gender-affirming medical and/or surgical interventions. 4 studies showing mixed or null findings, and 0 studies that gender-affirming interventions cause overall harm. More recent studies confirm that gender-affirming care can be immensely beneficial in properly selected candidates. Right? Another common theme in these bills is the demonization of surgical procedures used for gender reassignment by at least implying and often stating outright that such surgeries are genital mutilation carried out on children, which is, of course, this claim is untrue on many different levels, and it becomes like a game of debunking each layer after layer of lies. It's untrue because it is not performed on children. It's untrue because it's like a procedure that does not mutilate genitals but rather transform them to correspond to the ones that a person wants to have. Which I must admit, I am always shocked at how the self, like the far right always claims to be the pro-freedom party, but when it comes to real autonomy over your own body, suddenly the right stops being pro-freedom altogether, right? It becomes actually very tyrannical, anti-freedom when it comes to the topic of your body autonomy. You know, except it is performed on intersex children without their consent and to their detriment in many cases. Yeah, I know, because this actually fits perfectly into what I said just a second ago, Stephanie, because it's anti-freedom. You're not allowed to have autonomy over your body. There is a decision made for you that you are that, and you have to be that for the rest of your life. We will do a surgery on you without your consent to put you in this category that we have decided for you. From this day on, you are this, and you have no say in the matter. That's it. You know? That's it. And there has been a big protest. Recently, there have been big protests of intersex people against this sort of these sort of procedures after a child is born, because it robs people of autonomy over their own body and over their own identity. And I think we should all join in these sorts of protests whenever we are aware of them happening, right? Like, as I always say, love and solidarity, and we are all in this sort of struggle together. Even if we are not ourselves intersex, we still should treat this as our struggle to fight. Alright? Right. So we continue. For example, Kansas SB 214 would outlaw all gender reassignment surgeries for trans people under age of 18. The almost identical Idaho HB 675 straight out calls such surgeries genital mutilation of a child. Exempting those youth with differences in sex development or who are intersex. There you go. Right? Those bills explicitly exempt intersex children so that surgeries can be performed without consent on children who have just been born, which is what Stephanie has just pointed out in the chat, right? For which we are eternally grateful. To Kansas legislators, normalizing genitals is apparently more important than considering the harms of forced genital surgery. There we go, the exact topic that we have been just talking about. Right. To Kansas legislators, normalizing genitals is apparently more important than considering the harms of forced genital surgery. This is important because this is still a reality that people have to fight against, protest against, and this fight has, as of today, as far as I know, this fight has still not been won, right? These things happen to this day, right? And we must fight for them to stop. Ironically, intersex surgeries are not medically necessary, while in contrast, gender-affirming surgeries can be. In addition, gender-affirming bottom surgery, a colloquialism for genital and reproductive system surgeries, including phalloplasty, vaginoplasty, hysterectomy, and metoidoplasty, is rare before patients are of legal age to provide informed consent themselves. I know about John Money. Ignoring these facts, Alabama SB 184 and HB 266 nonetheless state some in the medical community are aggressively pushing for interventions on minors that medically alter the child's hormonal balance and remove healthy external and internal sex organs when the child expresses a desire to appear as a sex different from his or her own. This is like a thing, right? There is a vast difference between gender affirmation and aggressive pushing of gender assignment medical and surgical care. The latter description uses intentionally fear-mongering language that implies that doctors are somehow bullying children into transitioning and pushing their parents to provide consent for gender-affirming care. I would suggest that it is aggressive to outlaw and criminalize healthcare for those who are already marginalized. True. Additionally, once again, it must be emphasized that genital surgery for gender reassignment is rarely carried out on patients with gender dysphoria who are under 18. Intersex patients accepted. Interesting that, isn't it? The Alabama bill also claims minors and often their parents are unable to comprehend and fully appreciate the risk and life implications, including permanent sterility that result from the use of puberty blockers. That's not true. Puberty blockers do not cause permanent sterility. Hormone replacement therapy does not necessarily cause permanent sterility. And let's be honest, like puberty blockers are less intrusive, cause less changes than hormone replacement therapy, and hormone replacement therapy is not guaranteed to cause infertility. Right? So yeah. Their parents are unable to comprehend? By that logic, we should outlaw everyone's GnRH agonists, hormone therapy, and surgical procedures such as breast augmentation. Such is the quality of the arguments being made in support of these bills, right in the bills themselves. I would agree, Carasso. But it causes really great harm, right? It causes big harm. Like when she says that maybe I should have just gotten friends in therapy and not transitioned. Okay. So, let's continue. Experimental medicine. Experimental medicine is where we start really diving into the claims of, well, bigoted legislators and Stephen. Experimental medicine. The argument that GA care is experimental is not new. The argument that gender-affirming care is experimental is not new, which is interesting, but continues to re-emerge and be used to argue against offering such care to minors, as Ari Drennan, LGBTQ Program Director for Media Matters for America, noted on Twitter. So, let me once again remind you all of the claims, because this little timestamp really reminds us of what we are responding to. I was talking with another woman a few days ago who was intersex and transitioned around the same time as I, 2002. Both of us were exposed to distopresol in utero. I had a few differences of sexual development myself. Right. Look at this.
Crazy takes. I'm surprised you didn't push back more regarding like HRT and me saying that it's like the evidence is not that strong.
It's not. I always fight against people that say that because you have to couch your language very carefully. Anytime somebody wants to come on and be like, oh no, we have very, very good scientific evidence concerning adolescent, stop, whatever you're about to say is not true. We don't have very strong evidence for almost anything regarding trans people, even adults for transitioning. Like in terms of doing this en masse, all of it is pretty new. The therapies and the like the actual therapy, not just the drug stuff, but they're talking all of that too. All of it is very new. All of it is experimental. Everybody.
That's pretty. There you go. All of it is new. All of it is experimental. All of it is new. All of it is experimental, according to Stephen. Right? All of it is experimental. All of this is basically one big lab test, which is nothing new. The new right-wing angle of attack is that no trans people should have access to hormone replacement therapy because it's experimental. Trans people have literally taken cross-sex hormones since at least 1918. Governor DeSantis' move is illegal, dangerous, and based on lies. You know? What makes a medical or surgical intervention experimental, though, as opposed to standard of care or an accepted option? The American Psychological Association defines an experimental treatment as an intervention or regimen that has shown some promise as a cure or ameliorative for a disease or condition, but is still being evaluated for efficacy, safety, and acceptability. Right? In general, experimental medical care and surgical procedures are not considered an acceptable standard of care for the treatment of the condition for which they are being evaluated and are generally still undergoing clinical trials to assess them for efficacy and safety. Some will be found in these clinical trials to be safe and effective, while most others will not be and be abandoned. Others will be abandoned. Here I will argue that gender-affirming medicine is by definition not experimental, no matter how often it is characterized explicitly as such in bills introduced in Alabama, Arizona, Kansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Ohio. Just the amount of states that are introducing those bills is staggering, to be honest. These are giant swaths of land. This affects so many people. This is like when you start reading those out, it becomes really, right? I will begin by discussing examples of medicine that is still considered experimental for comparison. After that, I will further break down the tenets of efficacy, safety, and acceptability for gender-affirming care. Right? So basically, we're gonna go through this step by step. This person is gonna lead us step by step and tell us why claiming that gender-affirming care is experimental is a whole load of BS. And keep in mind, Stephen, very kind of him that he specified, said that when he means that gender-affirming care for both adults and children is experimental, he doesn't just mean medical transition. He means everything. He means HRT, he means surgery, he means mental health care, anything, everything and anything, right? So here we go. There are many. I live in Ohio, and it's getting bad here. The best resources we have for trans people end up in our 2-3 big cities, and that's it. Yeah. It is high time for us to be studying organizing. I really encourage everybody to start creating, I think Google Card would be okay, to start sort of talking to one another, organizing, for us to help those who are in dangerous states, to possibly leave them and, start anew in a more safe state, right? To continue existing in a more safe state. There are many areas of healthcare that employ experimental medicine. Examples include gene therapy, trials for cancer treatment, or the use of bacteriophages for bacterial infections. Also, experimental medicine, I'm pretty sure, is used when trying to find better treatment for things like Alzheimer's disease. Experiments in medicines are necessary to advance the study of treatments and is widely accepted. Yeah, of course. Like you have actual clinical trials to which people just sign up for, and we try medicine that will possibly help people. In contrast to the use of the term experimental to describe such investigational treatments, in trans healthcare, the term experimental seems to be used exclusively as a derisive tagline to dismiss gender affirming care. The intent behind this disparaging and dismissive use is to promote the view is that the safety and efficacy of gender affirming care is so much in doubt that it cannot be generally used and requires more clinical trials to evaluate its efficacy and safety before it can be recommended. Of course, there is also a not so subtle implication behind labeling gender affirming care as experimental, namely that it is also dangerous, which then often leads to further claims that clinical trials of gender affirming care would be unethical. In essence, those promoting these bills seems to be deceptively conflating experimental medicine, i.e. unproven treatments, with disproven treatments, safe in the knowledge that most people outside of medicine will not know the difference. Right? We continue. Affirming care to support people's unhealthy coping mechanisms and desire for escapism when most likely there is a deeper issue than being trans. Yeah, that is how it's being framed. Right? This is how it's being framed. The fried pinks. See, this person in the chat has described basically the logic behind the legislators, right? This is the logic behind the legislators. Thank you for demonstrating. Thank you for demonstrating it to us. So, yeah. So, yeah. We are going to save this. And we are going to remove. There we go. We have been timed out. Okay. There are many areas of healthcare that employ experimental medicine. I will send you what happened in the DMs on Discord, okay? Okay. No, it was like a real person. Okay. Let me see. Experiments in medicine are necessary to advance the study of treatments is widely accepted in contrast to the use of the term experimental to describe such investigational treatments. Intrascalpel. Okay, we have read this. Okay, let's move on to consider the efficacy and safety of gender affirming care. Right? Yeah, Karas, I have sent you on the Discord what happened. Efficacy of gender affirming medicine. The World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, considered by many to be the leader in promoting evidence-based trans healthcare, has endorsed gender-affirming surgery and medical therapy to be effective and often life-saving care. The treatment efficacy on GNRHA in delaying puberty in trans youth has been thoroughly documented in scientific studies and publications since the 1990s. So based in 1990s, since we are in 2023, my gosh, time flies. So 90, 2000, 2000, 2010, like 33 years of trials. That's not a very short time. That's not a very long time, but it's also 30 plus years is not a super short time, right? Studies support the conclusion that trans children supported in their gender identity by their families have rates of depression comparable to their cisgender peers. Studies suggest that youth that access gender-affirming care have improved body satisfaction and self-esteem, which is protective against poorer mental health and supports healthy relationships with parents and peers. Research consistently demonstrates that trans youth affirmed in their gender identity by their families have significantly better health outcomes. Moreover, social and medical gender affirmation is inversely related to mental health problems in trans people. Right? So we have this example of the thing. Safety of gender affirming medicine. So you went to efficacy of gender affirming medicine. Now we have safety of gender affirming medicine. So I think this is a pretty good article that demonstrates just why the claim of Stephen that this is all highly experimental is just incorrect, right? It's just a blatantly incorrect claim. But there's a lot more to go through, so we shall do so. It is essential to point out that puberty blockers, which are widely used to treat precocious puberty, seem only to be considered experimental and dangerous when used as part of gender-affirming treatment for pubescent trans youth. This is a very, very important thing to point out, and I think this has been already pointed out in chat by people like Stephanie and people like Karasu, right? that it only becomes experimental when it's used for trans people. Some equate the use of off-label medications to experimental use of said medications. Off-label drug use is the common practice of prescribing an available medication for an indication that the FDA has not approved. Once medications are on the market, the FDA does not control or limit how health care providers prescribe them. Off-label use of gender affirmation treatments, such as puberty blockers in youth, does not make the treatment experimental. Again, GnRH analogs have been the gold standard treatment in children with central precocious puberty since the 1980s and used in trans youth since the late 1980s. When used in cis children, puberty blockers have an enviable track record of safety and efficacy. So, in other words, it is tested, right? It is tested, it is proven. It is not an experimental treatment. Stephen. Puberty blockers are used similarly in trans youth once they hit puberty to halt permanent changes. It should be emphasized that the effects of blockers are both temporary and reversible. True. True, true, true. Right? This is what I said, that the question is how comparable are those treatments outside of the context of gender affirming care to gender affirming care? And the answer seems to be a lot, right? That some of those treatments directly translate. Standard of care and gender affirming medicine. So we continue. One thing that nearly all standard of care treatments for any condition have in common is that they are recommended and endorsed by major professional societies after evaluation of existing evidence in the peer-reviewed medical literature by an expert panel. While those who seek to deny science-based medicine view this argument as an appeal to authority. Okay? Oh my gosh. An appeal to such an authority is not a logical fallacy when the authority is legitimate. Personally, I like to look at an appeal to expert consensus as nothing more than a convenient shorthand for referring to the existing evidence base. Moreover, general expert consensus statements from such medical societies always include lengthy discussions of the evidence, including strengths and weaknesses, upon which consensus recommendations are based, often also graded by the strength of the evidence supporting each recommendation. They're like presuppositionalists, right? Right. WPATH has been publishing standards of care, SOC, for trans healthcare since 1979. And gender affirming care is endorsed by every major medical association. It is currently the standard of care for treating trans patients, be they an adult or adolescent, contrary to the newly released and deeply flawed Heritage Foundation study, quote unquote, that claims that access to gender affirming care is associated with an increase in suicides, which was not even published in the peer-reviewed medical literature. Better quality research has consistently concluded that access to gender affirming care can be life-saving and improves mental health outcomes in trans youth. Indeed, trans youth thrive in supportive environments. Overall, the existing research base overwhelmingly supports an affirmative approach. No, Steven's under 40. Steven's actually under 40, believe it or not. Steven's actually like 30 something. Steven's under 40. Maybe he looks older. Who knows? I think he's like 33 or something, no? So there you go. True. Indeed. Indeed, even the American Medical Association, AMA, definitely not a woke or even liberal organization, passed a resolution in 2008 supporting health insurance coverage for gender affirming care of gender dysphoria that included the following passage. Health experts in GID, including WPATH, have rejected the myth that such treatments are cosmetic or experimental and have recognized that these treatments can provide safe and effective treatment for a serious health condition. Maybe he just looks old, you know? Maybe Steven just looks old. You know, maybe we should just consider that Steven looks kind of old. Okay. That was mean. This is Lucy being mean. Mean ducky, come on. It's true. It's true. Like this is a mean duck. The Deputy of Health and Human Services, HHS, has reaffirmed HHS support and protection of LGBTQ youths and has issued new guidance to clarify the topic of non-discrimination related to gender identity as KFF.org, a non-partisan source of facts, analysis, and journalism for policymakers, the media, the health policy community, and the public, note. The fascism is aging him, it does that. True. Sad but true. True. Truth. Truth. Also, I will take this short pause to tell you that if you want to become a Patreon, then please click this link. Even $1 pledge is big for me because it's like 5 times more in Polish currency. And if I reach a certain threshold of Patreon money, I will be able to kickstart all of my plans, which actually does include transitioning. So there you go here, Patreon. Right? You too can support Lucy in her transition journey. There you go. I've made this little aside. And now we continue. Whoops. Also, I need a chair that makes less noise. That's also true. That's also true. It's more true than ever. Specifically, the guidance states that categorically refusing treatment based on gender identity is prohibited discrimination under Section 1557. The guidance also states that Section 1557's prohibition against sex-based discrimination is likely violated if a provider reports parents seeking medically necessary gender-affirming care for their child to state authorities if the provider or facility is receiving federal funding. The guidance further states that restricting a provider from providing gender-affirming care may violate Section 1557. Okay, we continue to read the article. I actually really like this article. That's a really good one, right? It is I am the oldest voice. I am the oldest voice. Karasu can confirm I'm the oldest voice. But yeah, we continue. Is the oldest there on the left, okay? It is quite simply a misinterpretation of what a standard of care is in medicine and of what constitutes experimental medical interventions to argue that gender-affirming care is experimental. It is not. Gender-affirming care is the current standard of care. That the evidence base is not as certain or settled as it is for, to cite examples, the evidence base supporting the current standards of care for various cancers, diabetes, hypertension, and the like does not make gender-affirming care for trans youth experimental, any more than the same considerations make a lot of psychiatric care experimental. Moreover, that the standard of care will likely change in the future as a new evidence accumulates does not make gender-affirming care now experimental any more than the discovery that peptic ulcers are mainly due to bacteria that can be well treated with antibiotics rendered the past treatment of peptic ulcer disease somehow experimental. Standards of care and clinical guidelines evolve and are regularly updated, which is why physicians have continuing education and board certification requirements. It is imperative for us to stay on top of the latest available information. These evolving standards of care do not negate prior standards. Both reflect the latest science-based evidence and the new standards of care supplant older ones as new evidence is accumulated. Indeed, new standards of care should supplant older ones based on evidence. If this were not the case, doctors would still be using bloodletting for nearly everything and commonly treating patients with concoctions that include cadmium and other toxic heavy metals. Alright, you all then. Uncertainty in medicine. So basically, we are point by point demonstrating why this whole notion of experimentation is nonsense, and if need be, we will deep dive into the studies that accompany this article, because this article has linked at least 52 of them, a list of 52 studies, right? We continue. Uncertainty in medicine. William Oster characterized medicine as a science of uncertainty and an art of probability. Opponents of trans care often point to the lack of randomized controlled trials of gender affirmation, ignoring that such trials would be near impossible to carry out and often unethical. You know? LCTs can show whether a treatment is better than a placebo. An application, however, carrying out an RCT in which one group of trans youth is randomized to gender-affirming treatment and the other to placebo is arguably unethical because there would not be clinical equipoise between the groups, i.e. genuine uncertainty about which group, control or experimental, would fare better or worse, which would suffer more harm or more benefit. Let me elaborate with an example. Where puberty blockers can stop distressing characteristics of an unwanted puberty from developing, withholding them from a control group would likely intensify feelings of distress, depression, anxiety, and dysphoria. Also, how does one randomize and double-blind an RCT in which the group receiving gender-affirming intervention will always feel the physical effects of treatment? We know that gender-affirming hormones cause physical changes, or, as with blockers, the lack of pubertal changes. While the placebo group will not show these changes, an RCT that will demonstrate the efficacy of gender-affirming therapy is redundant. You know? I remember that horrible episode of House when, like, House called a girl a man because something you have testicles inside of you. My God, that was a horrible episode, okay? House MD transphobia is the worst. Small trials are methodologically challenging. The smaller a trial, the larger the treatment effect necessary for the results to be significant. So that it's easy to miss small effects that may be clinically but statistically insignificant. Trials that show no statistically significant benefits are less likely to be published, and so less likely to make their way into systemic reviews, and thus into the accepted evidence base. Other reasons why small studies that target disadvantaged populations are unlikely to be performed concern the funding of research and the comparative nature of many studies. Further, although RCTs are considered the gold standard of medical evidence, they are not infallible. For example, patients in trials are not always representative of patients in the real world. Upcoming research is evolving to include hard-to-read and often omitted demographic groups, and to work with instead of trans people. There is no need for larger scale studies that have questions about gender identity, notably absent in prior research. Requirement in rural areas as well as metropolitan, the inclusion of intersectional minorities overlooked and ignored by the system, and analysis of the specific factors that predict rejecting family behaviors and those that contribute to positive climates. Again, the existence of those gaps in our knowledge about who benefits most from gender-affirming care does not make gender-affirming care experimental, any more than uncertainty over which groups benefit most from different approaches to, for example, treating hypertension makes. For example, anti-hypertensive treatment experimental. People who are historically minoritized due to issues such as systemic racism have been excluded or underrepresented in studies on hypertension, aspirin use, diabetes, and cancer screening. Further research will hopefully fill these gaps and inform new recommendations and guidelines. This does not make current hypertension guidelines, heart disease treatment, and diabetes treatment or preventative health measures experimental. Yeah, I don't think anyone would suddenly try to argue that our diabetes treatments are experimental. Painkillers are not reliable in a sense that we don't know how much it will affect one person exactly. True, 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 true. It is the truth that you tell me right now. And so we move on. A closer look at some of the bills outlawing gender affirming care. Transformations. That is interesting name. Transformation, a non-profit providing actionable information on harmful anti-trans legislation. It reminds me of the Polish trans organization called the Transfusion. Has detailed descriptions of all proposed active, past, and failed bills. The following are few examples. Alabama's recent Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act, VCAP, makes the provision of gender-affirming care to minors a Class C felony, punishable by $15,000 fine or up to 10 years in prison or both. Thankfully, a federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction to stop Alabama from enforcing the legislation. Unfortunately, the law includes an unblocked provision requiring schools to tell parents if their child discloses to a school official that they might be trans, putting those with unsupportive home environments at risk, which is the worst thing that can happen to a child, quite literally, because it turns your home to a living nightmare overnight. You know, it turns your own home into a hell. Okay, I will be right back, as I need to go to the toilet real quick. So don't go anywhere. We will continue with reading of the article and discussing this topic when I'm back. And then, yeah, so I will play a... no, I will not play a toilet music after. Oh, maybe I will. Let's play a toilet music, okay? You all like my toilet music, so it's like a treat, you know? A treat.
try again 退屈な時は悪いやつだった無限とに気晴らしストレスも飛んでお宝まで手にすればやめられないお気楽にちょっと遊ぶたびに満たされた気分だわスリリングな日のエッセンスは美味しくなくちゃダメねあれも欲しいこれも欲しい女の子は欲張りよ生きることは綺麗事じゃ通り抜けられない Far away 思うままわがままに旅を続けて行きたい辛い日々も笑顔でピリモードよ Far away いつでも一人じゃない力合わせ歩が先夢に向かい歩き続けてゆく限りないほどやったろ try again Far away 思うままわがままに旅を続けて行きたい辛い日々も笑顔でピリオドよ Far away いくつもの魔力抱いて今日を越えて行きたいの夢に向かい歩き続けてゆく Far away いつでも一人じゃない力合わせ歩が先夢に向かい歩き続けてゆく限りないほどやったろ try again
I am back just in time, come on! Giggling! Yeah. It's all experimental, what do you mean? It's giggling! It's experimental giggling. So I'm back. I see you have been discussing experiments while I was gone. So yeah. Let's see. I have no way to exactly measure how effective it was, except the personal responses of secondary effects like similarly blissful sleep or better activity, observable happiness, or something. Like with painkillers, like the biggest thing is the relief you feel, right, from the lack of pain, right? The sense of relief is usually the thing. Yeah, that's pretty similar how GAC observably affects people. Perhaps pain mitigation may be a good analogy. With painkillers, it's usually not about mitigation. And with painkillers, it's usually like about the sense of relief that the painkillers provide you, right? Okay. Yeah, so yeah, we can now officially continue. Some people have dropped off, but some people have stayed, and that's okay, right? Yeah, different painkillers. Some painkillers you cannot even get before without. Poland actually has an amazing amount of painkillers that you can just get from anywhere, and they are really strong. In Poland, you can get really strong painkillers just from a corner store. You can just go to a store that sells you, you know, Coca-Cola. You buy a Coca-Cola, a pack of crisps, and a pack of strong painkillers on the side, you know, in your little store. And some painkillers you just can't get without a medical prescription. Like, I think there's this medical con, like, there are some painkillers that definitely you can just get from prescription. But oh yeah, okay, let's go. Let's continue with the course. The sense of relief transitioning provided me was indescribable. The last 25 years has been so good, just man. See, Gigler? Not to press on this, but if you become like a $1 Patreon, you like a move. Lucy has a one step closer to starting her journey. Okay, starting her journey in like becoming a real girl. Yeah, right. But there's this painkiller called what's it called? Ketanol Forte. You need to get medical in Poland you need prescription to get this Ketanol Forte. You cannot get this without a doctor's permission. For this in Poland you need a doctor's prescription. You know? So there you go. Right? But okay, let's go back to the actual let's go to the actual article and to the topic of our discussion. I might have to cut this whole thing out from when I turn this into segments. A closer look at some of the bills outlawing gender-affirming care. You should eat more. Transformations, a non-profit, you have read this? Has detailed descriptions of all proposed active, past, and failed bills. The following are a few examples. Alabama's recent Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act, VCAP. We will also be able to look at some bills later and analyze them, their harm. Makes the provision of gender-affirming care to minor a Class C felony. We have actually read this already. 10 years in prison. Thankfully, a judge was smart enough to not allow this to happen. Right? Florida Governor DeSantis, like this infamous person DeSantis administration, is recommending to the Florida Board of Medicine that they ban gender affirming care for minors and all medical recipients, meaning a ban on all trans related care for adults and minors on state insurance. This too prolonged tactic ensures quick action and avoids legislative approval. Last year, DeSantis signed the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, a law preventing trans girls from competing on girls' high school and college sports teams. He recently made a proclamation declaring a cisgender woman to be rightful winner in an NCAA First Division swimming championship won by a transgender woman, Leah Thomas. Very, very large case, very well documented case. Like, I think everybody has made a video on this thing, so I don't think we need to discuss the Leah Thomas case right now. Yeah, only I can stop Florida, it's true. Only me. Only me. It's not a movie, it's Lucy's life, it's Lucy's mission. And in March, signed the colloquially titled Don't Say Gay Bill, the Parental Rights in Education Bill, that restricts education on gender identity and sexual orientation in public schools. Okay. On June 12, Florida State Surgeon General and Secretary of the Florida Department of Health, Joseph Ladapo, sent a letter to the Florida Board of Medicine recommending against not just surgical and pharmaceutical gender-affirming interventions for trans adolescents, but even non-pharmacological interventions. Ladapo has created prior controversy with his anti-mask stance because those stances, I think this is worth noting, this is worth acknowledging, that oftentimes bigoted stances come together as a set, right? If you're a bigot against trans people, you're usually also an anti-vaxxer. You're usually also think that the election was stolen against Trump or something like that. Like, those beliefs usually come in sets, sadly. Opposition to vaccine mandates, of course, people are usually also anti-vax. Promotion of quack COVID treatments such as hydroxychloroquine, I remember that, and an emergency rule that discriminates against black farmers applying for medical marijuana licensure. Damn. He has also recommended against COVID vaccines for healthy children aged 5 to 17, making Florida the first state to do so formally. His recommendation was cherry-picked from 3 studies, which in fact concluded that vaccines are safe and effective. Yeah, right. I miss the times when Florida was just about the Florida man memes, but I guess Florida decided that it's not enough. Florida decided to escalate. Florida has decided to take it to the next level. Unfortunate. Very unfortunate. In this recent letter to the state medical board, Ladapo wrote, As State Surgeon General, I recommended against certain pharmaceutical, non-pharmaceutical, and surgical treatments for gender dysphoria. So a surgeon is recommending against non-surgical and psychological treatments. Nice. The recommendations are based on a lack of conclusive evidence and the high risk of long-term irreversible harms from these treatments. The current standards set by the numerous professional organizations appear to follow a preferred political ideology instead of the highest level of generally accepted medical science. So, to translate this, okay? The current standards set by our current medical knowledge is actually political, and actually there is this silent minority that is the real... wait, that was today? What was today? The thing that I'm reading? That was today? Florida, okay, political ideal. So to translate it, what this means that there is this some silent minority that actually practices like real science, you know, that is real generally accepted medical science, the thing that is accepted as, you know, by the organization is just political. Oh, this is from today? This is, wow, this is wild. Florida must do more to protect children from politics-based medicine. Interesting. Otherwise, children and adolescents in our state will continue to face a substantial risk of long-term harm. Politics-based medicine. Interesting. Ladapo sources guidance released on April 20th by the Florida Deputy of Health, which directly contradicts federal guidance by the HHS and has already been refuted by more than 300 Florida healthcare professionals, as well as the report of an investigation conducted by the Agency of Healthcare Administration, which was released on June 2nd. The report summary, ironically titled "Let Kids Be Kids," has been condemned by WPATH and the United States Professional Association for Transgender Health, USPATH, which had also previously debunked research cited in the April 20th guidance. Writers note, unless they're trans. Alright, let kids be kids, unless they're trans. Okay. Oh, Florida is banning books and threatening teachers with criminal charges. Florida is also demanding a list of all persons who have had gender-affirming surgical genital surgery. Yeah, Florida needs to stop. Florida's mad. Wow. Prevent Child Abuse America. The nation's oldest and largest organization committed to preventing child abuse and neglect before it happens issued a statement reacting to the Texas AG's opinion and in support of gender-affirming care. Prevent Child Abuse America, PCA America, knows that providing necessary and adequate medical care to your child is not child abuse, and that transgender and non-binary children need to access to age-appropriate individualized medical care just like every other child. Regardless of the outcomes on a stable and federal level, the current political debates have detrimental consequences. The Travers Project's National Survey on LGBTQ Youth Mental Health 2021 found that recent politics negatively impacted 94% of LGBTQ youth's mental health. South Dakota was the first state to enact an anti-trans bill in 2022. 90% of LGBTQ youth in South Dakota are diagnosed with depression or anxiety. As ADM Rachel Levitt, MD, U.S. Assistant Secretary for Health, has stated, trans youth in particular are being hounded in public and driven to death of despair at an alarming rate. 52% of all transgender and non-binary young people in the US seriously contemplated killing themselves in 2020. Think about how many of them thought it was better to die than to put up with any more harassment, scapegoating, and intentional abuse. In addition, trans people are more than 4 times as likely as cis people to be victims of violence and inadequate police and legal protection. 74 elected law enforcement leaders and prosecutors summed up the criminalization of JAM in a joint statement. Bills that criminalize safe and crucial medical treatments or the mere public existence of trans people do not promote public safety, community trust, or fiscal responsibility. They serve no legitimate purpose. We do not support the use of scarce criminal justice and law enforcement resources on criminalization of doctors who offer medically necessary, safe, gender-affirming care to trans youth, parents who safeguard their child's health and well-being by seeking out such treatments, or any individuals who use facilities aligned with their gender identity. Right? We are almost at the end of this article. No, we are not, actually. Or are we? Yeah, we are. Conclusion. Politicians and certain streamers should not dictate medical care. Bills cannot claim to protect kids while harming them. Medical experts support gender-affirming care. Politicians should not be interfering in medical decisions made between a healthcare provider and their patients. Contrary to the rationale used to justify bills outlawing gender-affirming care in adolescents and making such more difficult for adults to access, even with the uncertainties in the evidence base for treating gender dysphoria and trans youth, gender-affirming care is not experimental. Rather, it is the standard of care. Laws seeking to ban gender-affirming care are not more science-based than laws seeking to make ivermectin available over the counter to treat COVID-19, to limit school vaccine mandates, or to license naturopathy, and other pseudo-medicine. They are as recently retired SBM editor Jean Bellamy used to describe laws legalizing pseudo-medicine, legislative alchemy. Right? So I should bring myself back. Where am I? I don't see myself. Please and thank you. There you go. I am back on screen. David Górski, interesting. That's a Polish surname. Invisible woman, yeah, true. Okay, how do we feel? How do we feel about this? Dr. Górski, Góra means mountain. So it's like David mountain man, David the mountain man. Dr. Górski's full information can be found here, along with information by patients David T. Górski. Okay, let's see. Where is it? Where is the information about you, Dr. Górski? Huh? Where is Dr. Górski? I don't see. Strange. Breast cancer surgery. Oh. Please check out the cruisy biography information disclaimers. His writings on this. Okay, let's see. We will learn everything. This is definitely a Polish surname. I wonder if this was Paul. No, it will not mention. But I know this is a Polish surname, so don't worry. Don't worry, I've got you covered. So now we can take a look at some of the. What does the scholarly research say about the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being? There we go. This is the thing with the 51 studies that basically demonstrate that this is not some experiment, but actually a pretty well proven thing, right? You would agree with that, right? Oh, yeah. Okay. Oof. So now I give my viewers a... Because we've been going for 2 hours, right? So do we want to look through this now? This is a... Okay, let's go. What does the scholarly research say about the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being? Hmm. All right. All right. Giggling. Let me see. Real quick. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Oh my gosh. Where are we? Invisible woman. Want to check something real quick? This is not it. Ah! I have to turn this off. I'm lost in the... Oh my gosh.
Non-conforming men that cross-dress. How
Oh my gosh. There's so many things on. Eklers, you would not believe how many things I keep having on. Should calm down and turn some things off. I get lost in the sauce. And now trying to find something and I can't.
Restful with all my
Okay, turn this off. Okay. Let me see. Oh my gosh! Killers. What's going on? Okay. Zanderhal? Why Zanderhal? Oh my gosh. And now this. Oh my gosh. Giggles. I am making big cleaning in real time.
I think a lot of people can
Oh. It's like Dylan Burns.
You.
Dimo Mama? What the heck? Kickers, what the heck? Okay. Alright, I am ready. I am ready now. Okay. I made myself visible because you like seeing me. You like seeing me on screen, it's true. You admit it, please. Admit it, please, thank you. Okay, what does the scholarly research say about the effect of a gender transition on transgender well-being? Overview. We conducted a systemic literature review of all peer-reviewed articles published in English between 1991 and June 2017 that assess the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being. We identified 55 studies that consist of primary research on this topic, of which 51, 93% found that gender transition improves the overall well-being of transgender people, while 7% report mixed or null findings. We found no studies concluding that gender transition causes overall harm. As another resource, we separately include 17 additional studies that consist of literature reviews and practitioner guidelines. So there are more than 52 studies in here. Bottom line, this search found a robust international consensus in the peer-reviewed literature that gender transition, including medical treatments such as hormone therapy and surgeries, improves the overall well-being of transgender individuals. The literature also indicates that gender availability of medical and social support for gender transition contributes to better quality of life for those who identify as transgender. Below are 8 findings of our review and links to the 72 studies on which they are based. Click here to view our methodology. Click here for a printer-friendly one-pager of this research analysis. Suggested citation. What we know project, Cornell University. What does the scholarly research say about the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being? Online literature review 2018. Research findings. The scholarly literature makes clear that gender transition is effective in treating gender dysphoria and can significantly improve the well-being of transgender individuals. That's one. Two, among the positive outcomes of gender transition and related medical treatments for transgender individuals are improved quality of life, greater relationship satisfaction, higher self-esteem and confidence, and reductions in anxiety, depression, and suicidality and substance use. 3. The positive impact of gender transition on transgender well-being has grown considerably in recent years as both surgical techniques and social support have improved. Hello. 4. Regrets following gender transition are extremely rare and have become even rarer as both surgical techniques and social support have improved. Pooling data from numerous studies demonstrates a regret rate ranging from 3% to 3.8%. Regrets are most likely to result from lack of social support after transition or poor surgical outcomes using older techniques. Right. 5. Factors that are predictive of success in the treatment of gender dysphoria include adequate preparation and mental health support prior to treatment, proper follow-up care from knowledgeable providers, consistent family and social support, and high-quality surgical outcomes when surgery is involved. Transgender individuals, particularly those who cannot access treatment for gender dysphoria or who encounter unsupportive social environments, are more likely than the general population to experience health challenges such as depression, anxiety, suicidality, and minority stress. While gender transition can mitigate these challenges, the health and well-being of transgender people can be harmed by stigmatizing and discriminatory treatment. 7. An inherent limitation in the field of transgender health research is that it is difficult to conduct prospective studies or randomized control trials of treatments for gender dysphoria because of the individualized nature of treatment. The varying and unique and equal circumstances of population members, the small size of the known transgender population, and the ethical issues involved in withholding an effective treatment from those who need it. 8. Transgender outcomes research is still evolving and has been limited by the historical stigma against conducting research in this field. More research is needed to adequately characterize and address the needs of the transgender population. Below are 51 studies that found that gender transition improves the well-being of transgender people. Click here to jump to 4 studies that contain mixed or null findings on the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being. Click here to jump to 17 studies that consist of literature reviews or guidelines that help advance knowledge about the effect of gender transition on transgender well-being. Right? Click on any thumbnail to view its abstract. Click below each thumbnail to visit the source website. So this is a very well sourced page. A lot of stuff in here that we can use, right? A lot of useful information in here. So we have went in depth through a really long article today. And I think we will stop here for today, and that tomorrow we will basically go through this page, and we will individually go through the abstracts of the studies. We will look at the dates, which will help us answer the question of, are these studies very recent? Is the research on gender affirming care new? Is it all really all that new and untested? We have already sort of answered the question what it means for medical treatment to be experimental, and we have answered the question if gender affirming care is experimental or no. Although we will revisit that question again with more studies, articles, and writings. But for now, we will conclude today's research stream. I think I will finish the stream here. I will start a new stream, which will be more of a video game stream. I want to keep this stream video to be purely research portion. So I will finish it and start a brand new stream. And if anybody wants to join for some video games, then please join. And if no, then I will see you tomorrow for the third day of our researching the claim that trans healthcare is highly experimental and untested. Which, before I will finish the stream, I will once again show you the main claim that we are replying to. Okay? I show you now.
More regarding like HRT and me saying that it's like the evidence is not that strong.
It's not. I always fight against people that say that because you have to couch your language very carefully. Anytime somebody wants to come on and be like, oh no, we have very, very good scientific evidence concerning adolescent. Blah, stop. Whatever you're about to say is not true. We don't have very strong evidence for almost anything regarding trans people, even adults for transition. And like in terms of doing this en masse, all of it is pretty new. The therapies and the like the actual therapy, not just the drug stuff, but they're talking all of that too. All of it is very new. All of it is experimental. Everybody.
All of it is new, all of it is experimental. There we go. Stephen claimed that we are basically, that this has made us want to do this whole research series to begin with. And we are well on our way. Okay. And then maybe this is like, a quick announcement because we have actually, we have stumbled into this claim of, that this is all new. So after we finish the research series on gender affirming care, we will be jumping into the topic of non-binary people and the gender affirming care regarding non-binary people, and how transition techniques such as hormone therapy, etc., are how non-binary people also benefit from those things. Okay, so I'll see you again. I click end and I do my break by playing video game. Okay, it's true. I see you. I click end stream now. And